Okay. The T-urist. Ahaha. Okay. You'll be lurking. Well, it's good to have you. Lurk away, man. Or woman, or whatever. You know? Whatever your deal is, glad to have you. Okay. Archive source. Temporary name. Not implemented yet at all. This is nice. Yeah, okay. Archive source. This will be a function. It's not a function yet. This will be a compiler before it's a function. Yay! Okay, archive source. And this is going to take store triad and a sync. So here's where the debug sync comes in. Let mute s equals string new debug sync equals yes, that's how this works, right? It's gotta be. And okay. Honestly, now that we have the receipt type, I kind of wonder if the debug sync should be producing, or yeah, the debug sync should be producing the string. I would like to make that change, honestly. Maybe not right this second. I can put it off, but I think it's the right thing to do. Which continues my trend of accidentally phrasing things as if they're moral questions instead of software maintainability questions. I need to find some language that distinguishes between those connotations of right and wrong, because they're not completely far apart, because I feel pretty strongly about not shipping garbage. Yeah. Let me send that I'll type it to you on my phone. Really what I need to do is I need to set it up so that the documentation, because here's the generated docs and there's a bunch of stuff in here, that's very useful. I want that to be like on GitHub pages. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me do this so you can actually read it. Okay, so I'll do that. I'll keep tinkering over here. You can see most of the code anyways, so yeah. What this is for is treating immutable directories in kind of like a functional programming sort of a way, where you like do mutations on them and you get a new object instead of having the original mutated. Yeah? Cool. Oh, shit. Yeah, everything is immutable once it's in storage, and so it can only be like, you can create or delete, but modification is just like making a new adjacent copy. It's slightly different, but then the copies coexist. There is storage sharing on the file level, so you're not gonna like blow up your amount of storage used. And the point of this is for a package manager that I want to write, like a Linux package manager. It's going to be based on this. This is going to be the foundational technology for a package manager. So that's why I'm doing this thing that is like particularly specific and technical and esoteric. That's the word I've been looking for all day. Like, this is an extremely esoteric tool in terms of what it's for. But it's going to be immediately useful when it's like good enough to use. Like, it's highly motivated by the package manager it's going to be used in. Yeah, esoteric's a good word. I always forget it, and it always takes me a while to like find it again, but it's such a good word. Alright, so I'm gonna have storage that we pull from a triad and some sort of sink. And we do have the, of course we have the train, we're using it, so we have that in scope. Okay. So in this case, we're putting it into S produces a result of S seat where S is a type that implements sync. Cool. Okay. Actually, I could literally do sync.finalize here. Okay. And for the multi-line text, we're going to use indoc. So, S, indoc, and we're hitting the move problem. I knew we would. I knew we would. Okay. All right. So, here's the line. We need to take a mutable borrow of that. And probably a mutable borrow here. Okay. I'm increasingly convinced to, like, right after this, do the debug sync change with the receipt type. But yeah, let's see what we have to do here. Mute store. It's not going to entirely work. This is going to have a bunch of errors, and we're just going to slowly pick away. Of course. You don't have to be sorry at all. Having any interest in what I'm doing warms my heart. I will move heaven and earth to make you happy. Right now. Okay, maybe that's a slight exaggeration. But okay. So here's really the first thing I need to address here. Having this be a mutable pointer means I need a lifetime. So there's the start of fixing this. Can I just do that? That's what it said, right? Honestly, part of the reason I'm doing this project in Rust at all is because my Rust skills are not up to standards. But they've gotten a lot better since I started this project. Practice is helping me a lot. But I've had some misery getting that practice. Rust is, quite brutal. Okay. Case in point, all these errors. This is making me feel like I'm suddenly realizing a much deeper issue with my design. Rust's kind of funny because you start using it and everything is nice and all, and then suddenly, boom, please eat a borrow checker. I still haven't gotten out from these woods yet. So, yeah. There are people who talk about, Rust made me a better developer. Rust made me think harder about code structure. That's true to a degree, but I want to contextualize that with my experience. There's a lot of valid program structures that Rust will prevent because it is not smart enough to tell that they're safe. And there's a lot of, just kind of, rough edges, sharp edges, things where you expect stuff to exist and it doesn't. That kind of thing. Weird missing features. And the way that I've come to feel about it is not that I'm necessarily becoming a better general developer in ways to take to other languages. Maybe. We'll see when I go back to doing other stuff after working in Rust. Who knows? Maybe I'll be a better Python developer. That's my main language. But what I've come to feel is This is gonna be kind of dark, okay? Like, honestly. So, I had a period of my life, and not a short period either. Ooh, nice! Love Python. So I had a period of my life where I was married to a volatile and toxic person. I don't think that this person was evil, and it's easy to accidentally imply that, but this is a person that was not healthy to be in a relationship with, and was not good to me in a lot of ways. Alright? And I internalized into my psyche over a couple years. I internalized into my psyche how to predict what would make him angry, what would become a problem, that kind of thing. I learned through pain to be one step ahead of his misbehavior and emotional punishments. When I work with the borrow checker, it feels like that. Alright? In my brain, the circuits that I'm using for this it's like the compiler has a personality. And not a very nice personality. And I am internalizing, through suffering, how to prevent it being angry at me. And that kind of fucking sucks. I don't necessarily like using those circuits of my brain in a software context. I don't like that it comes, yeah. Exactly. Even when it's sometimes it's a conscious thought, sometimes it's a gut feeling, like, oh, some part of my hindbrain recognizes a pattern here that I know is going to be trouble when I try to express it to the compiler. Yeah. Obviously, not everyone's going to have that experience. And there's a lot of good things about the language. There's a reason why some people are, like, somewhat obnoxious fans about it, right? There's things to love. There's good and bad about Rust. Same as any language. But for me, this is how I relate to the language and its implementation. And it's stressful. And it's hard not to project an impression of Stockholm Syndrome about the people who are super fans of it and buy into, like, the compiler is always protecting me, the compiler knows what's right, I just have to appease the compiler. You know, it's hard for me not to project some of my own, like, abusive relationship metaphor there. Yeah. So, useful language. Yeah. So many people in tech have Stockholm Syndrome. And one of the ways that you know that that's true is, like, when a new thing comes out that's a little less abusive than the old thing, or at least differently abusive, people flock to it, and they have the relief of getting out of a bad relationship. And it's often a rebound into something that is just differently bad. This is one of the lenses that is worthwhile to apply to, like, the constant churn in the JavaScript ecosystem. The new thing always kind of sucks, but at least it sucks different than the old thing. And so people feel the weight off their shoulders when they get out of the bad relationship they were in. Have I tried talking to Oracle admins? No. I haven't known many. Most, like, the people in my circle have been able to avoid using Oracle products. Good God. They are infamous, though. You know? Like, Oracle databases have some interesting features, but, like, not that unique and exclusive versus what you can get with open source stuff that will not have the scariest lawyers of the industry shaking you down for everything they think they can make your company pay. Like, you don't have to endure anything about Oracle if you just don't get involved with their horrible business practices and mid products. But unfortunately, a lot of the people who administrate these things, like, it's not their fault. My impression of the like, Oracle using part of the industry is that in almost every case, it's like the person who's administrating it and having to live with the decision didn't make the decision. The decision was made by someone who went golfing with an Oracle salesperson and had the power and elevation in the customer company to say, this sounds pretty swell and we should use the Oracle database. Like that's basically the pattern that happens. Okay, so you had a DB crash for something completely random, like 2 commands in a row at the wrong time, and boom, there goes the DB. The guys there were like, but that's not a bug, just don't do it and it won't crash. Yeah, that's like, that is entirely in character for everything I've heard about the Oracle database software. And like, you can just like not have to deal with that by using anything else. You know? Like, it's genuinely hard to crash even MySQL, right? MySQL is not the best database. It's okay. It has disadvantages relative to Postgres. But it won't frickin' crash if you run 2 commands in a row like that. Like, it's pretty frickin' sturdy. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That sounds about right. I mean, to be fair, probably a lot of their clients, the benefit of the Oracle database software is that they purchased licenses originally in the DOS days, or at least like early Windows days, and they're still running it on Windows computers that are still like old versions of Windows. You know, there's a shit ton of legacy stuff that people want to have as little touching it liability as possible. There's so much like risk averseness to using better tools because it would require change. And also because the lawyers will get real mad at you. They don't like when you switch off Oracle. So, for real, like, purchasing an Oracle product is very much like inviting a vampire into your home. You are not going to be able to undo that decision easily, and it's going to have a lot of horrific consequences for the amount of blood in your body. Because they're here to suck you dry. That is the business model of Oracle. There's a reason why they have more lawyers on payroll than engineers. It tells you what kind of company they're running. Yeah. And that's what they're going for. Like, they're going for a vendor lock-in. And I make a big point about, like, the external side of that, of, like, you know, the contract law making it intractable to get off of Oracle database software. And that's true, but there's also the side of, like, the code that you write around it to use it ends up being not that portable. It ends up being pretty Oracle specific. And then you have a bunch of it. And it's difficult to, yeah, it's like kind of an all or nothing venture to port it to a different database. Honestly, if I was in that position, probably what I would be doing is I would be working on, like, having a read-only representation in a different database and synchronization technology to treat Oracle as upstream and use that as a source of truth to synchronize downstream to, like, Postgres. Alright? So then you can slowly build out your Postgres view of the world and have regular tests to make sure that it's actually correctly representing upstream. That's the point where you can start taking your code that talks to the database, importing the reads from Ask Oracle to Ask Postgres. Until eventually you have it where all of the reads are coming from Postgres, all of the writes are going to Oracle, and you can start doing your migration plan for treating parts of the Oracle database, especially the parts that are most amenable to being independent, treating those as the thing you send writes to, and it's the source of truth. That's kind of the only way to eat the elephant, and there's still some, like, big bites in the process. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Like, whatever approach you take, it's going to end up being, like, you're kind of building a new product that has to integrate with the old product until the old product is gone and the new product has completely subsumed it. Because if you have a application of any significant scale, then atomically switching from one to the other in a single migration is just unlikely to be viable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're doing it right. You're doing it smart. I have my fingers crossed for you. Like, seriously, Godspeed. That's hard stuff. At least you're getting paid for it. Like, I've worked on some difficult database migrations, but yeah. Oh, you're right. Oh God, that's right. I'm working on some nasty stuff right here. boy. Okay. So I think that's part of what needs to happen here, but like a very small part. Okay, so simple storage, I'm gonna have to revisit how that works. Oh, God. This is the part where I'm just like, I don't want to deal with it, but I have to. Alright. Do I have to, though? Maybe not, actually. Can I do that? Because this is all about like file system accesses and it's not actually mutating the storage. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I actually need those. And taking them out definitely made the output shorter. Okay, the stream core sync is not implemented for archive sync simple storage. Okay. I'm basically undoing a bunch of stuff that I did earlier. Because it turns out that it was a bit wrong-headed. Okay. So maybe not mutable reference, but reference. Can we do that? We're getting there. We're getting there. Almost. Oh, do we need to add a lifetime parameter back? Motherfucker, we do. There's a tool called Bacon that you can run in a separate term that will update automatically as you save files. Okay, let me do that so it's visible. Background Rust code check. Oh, it has an actual website. This might be more fancy. Oh, charming. Okay. I'm down to try this. Okay. Sure. Okay. So, here we go. Although, maybe I want to do that in the other side. Oh, I have freedom. This is my window manager. The test watching is really nice. I need to get in the habit of using Clippy, because I've literally never used it, which sounds possibly insane to people who have a bit more experience. My personality is to often do like, bare minimum dependency kind of mindset towards everything. Like I'll bring something in when it's really justified. And I think the problem is, like, I've heard good things about Clippy, but I don't know enough about it to go like, okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I've never had enough of a concept of the value of Clippy to go, oh my gosh, I need this in my life, it's non-negotiable. But I've never tried it, so maybe the value is there, and I just don't know. And I'll try it, and I'll fall in love, and we'll get married. I don't know. We'll find out. In the meantime. Oh, that's right. It's fucking lifetime shit. Oh, okay, that's fair. Alright. Oh, right. Okay. Now that's good. We're to compiling. So compilation has happened. If I do this, I think it passes. Lots of unused stuff. But this is good, because now we have... Oh, yeah. Yeah. Understandable. Okay. So, yeah, I think I do want this to be on the other side. There we go. That's how I do it. Leaves a very small section for documentation, but it means I can really see what I'm doing with the code I'm working on. Okay. Yeah, this is gonna be nice and viable. Wonderful. Okay. Now we're cooking with gas. This was a good recommendation. I know what I'm gonna do. Okay. So I'm gonna commit here. So I've got, this is kind of a save point. Alright, so towards stream interop with archive store. Okay. So here's the point where instead of indoc, here's where I know what I'm going to do. So earlier I was talking about, like, and I don't know if I said it very clearly or if you were on yet, but so this pattern of having a separate string and then passing a mutable reference into it, into the debug sync, that's something that has room for improvement. And if I improve it, this is going to suddenly be a lot more ergonomic to do. This is going to turn out good. So, there will temporarily be wailing and gnashing of teeth because the debug sync is used in several places with the current receipt type. And the receipt type is about to change. And the initialization type is about to change. So, this will have so many implications. Let txt. There we go. And that's going to return a string. This will fail, and it's ahead of its time. That is fundamentally the issue here. That is the test that will pass in a minute, and everything else is going to fail horrifically. Okay, so one of the nice things here is because we're not containing a reference to something external. That simplifies. There's no argument for this. String new. This is now owned by the sink. And that's what we pop out the other side. Okay. So no lifetime arguments there. No lifetime arguments here. This is saving me so much time. Okay. I'm still, like, by habit hitting comma T because that's my shortcut to run tests. Okay. Yeah, still doing it. Still doing it. I must resist. Okay, 56. Okay, we got more tests that we need to fix. I'm gonna do txt for these all. This is a nice convention here. It's getting a little confused. Muscle memory for Vim shortcuts built over years is bloody hard to change. Thankfully, it's not years, but it's a while, definitely, for sure. Okay. So I think this is getting confused by it being a doc test. No, I'm getting confused because I'm looking at the wrong file. There is a issue on 119. Okay. Sync. Alright. We're getting there. Source. Oh, it's source archive stream. Okay, we have that open already. And yeah, it's this one. Okay. And we don't even need a separate variable for this anymore, which is one of the ways it simplifies down. Okay. And here's where it really gets nice. So we can compare putting a debug here. Instead of unpacking those individually, for clarity, I'm just going to import the package and be like debug. So you can like clearly see where we're doing stuff with the debug library. Alright, so let txt equals that. Have it. Okay, it's now running, and we have the test asserting when it needs to assert. Okay. And I see why that doesn't work. Let txt equals now we're down to one failure. We no longer need indoc. All right. So what's going on in this code? It's got a lot of a lot of concepts. But these sources and sinks, the idea is a source is a thing that you can kind of like do this like sender, send file, and finalize on. Alright? This is where you can send file, directory, information, and then when you're done, you get out some type. Which is quite nice now that it actually like returns that type and result on finalize. This is a much better interface. Cool. So the debug source, debug sync construct, what that's doing. So, talking about the debug sync first, what that does is it just like builds up a string that looks like this based on what you push to it. And then finalize actually gets you the string back out and, you know, consumes/destroys the complex object, the actual sync. All right, so that's what the debug sync does. It's a type of sync that builds up a kind of a log of what you did. All right. The debug source is, of course, a type of source. Kind of like the debug sync is a type of sync. Sources are just functions that take some parameters, including a sync, and then they just put a bunch of stuff in the sync according to whatever they're supposed to do. The debug source is very simple. It always puts the same stuff into the sync. Sends a blank directory at /a/directory, and then sends a file at some_dir hello.txt. The stream API is sources and sinks and is pretty simple because you're always sending like some sort of readable object for any files. You're not referencing by hash. So there are optimizations that you cannot properly do with the stream API. But it's simple and it's universal and it works on things that don't fit the content address storage model. Like operating system directories that are just like, I'm importing this from a directory that's actually on the system into the database, or exporting to an operating system directory. Alright? Those things don't have pre-computed hashes for all the files. So this is more flexible and universal, this stream interface, at the cost of not being able to do certain optimizations and storage reuse. And then the storage model is all about a content address store where you're naturally getting deduplication of files that are the same because they'll have the same hash. So what I'm working on right now is the adapter between the two ways of thinking. One of which is a content address store model, and the other is the stream interface. So this allows you to stream stuff into the content address store and stream stuff out of it. And it'll always be a little less efficient to do that in terms of deduplication, but it's not an optimization you could really take advantage of anyways. The final piece of this puzzle is that there is a separation between the raw kind of content ignorant storage layer of content address store type stuff versus the interpretation of stuff in the store as archives, which is like a directory format, like with entries. Because we need to have some format, right? The content address store just stores buffers of bytes in some way, and it doesn't know what they mean. So we need a layer of meaning on top of that neutral ignorant layer. That's what archives are for. And they're all based on I'll pop over right, okay. So let's see. Here's the file I'm looking for. So an archive is just a vector of entries, right? And each entry is a path, a triad, and some attributes. So what's the triad? It's format, compression, digest. And that's just all you need to know to say, here's something in the store somewhere. The format and compression are how you interpret it. Like you can see immediately above, the format is either a plain file to be kind of taken for granted and not interpreted as an archive. JSON is an archive format as JSON. And there's going to be other formats that are more efficient than JSON, like protobuf I'm planning to support, for example. Compression, I'm kind of reserving that that's going to be a thing also, because, like GZ, XZ, that kind of thing. So in order to find something out of the content address store and know what to do with it, you not only need to know, what blob of bytes to fetch by, it's keyed on the hash. So here's what you use to find the raw blob of bytes. Here's what you do to turn it into some sort of plain text. And here's how you interpret that plain text into either a raw file or another archive. Because archives can reference other archives. And originally that was going to be the only way that you could reference directories within directories, is that would be represented as archives within archives. That's a decision I'm going to walk back. And so, don't worry too much about this exact format because it's going to change to make it a little easier to have empty directories in an archive without, referencing another archive that happens to be empty. Another fetch out of store just to find out it's empty! No, screw that. And that's going to make it, very straightforward for converting to and from streams and archives. In particular, taking a stream in and making an archive out of it. So, lots of moving parts to keep in my head at the same time. But what this trip is doing, or what this test is doing, this round trip, we're comparing a very direct round trip. That's our kind of like source of truth, our gold standard that we should be matching, which is taking a debug source and immediately putting it into a debug sync and getting quite literally like this text out of it. This literal text. So that's what this is going to be. Right here is going to be that literal text. That is, and you can see it right here. That's our gold standard that we're testing against. What we are testing is we take the debug source, we put it into a storage, and then we take it out of the storage. And this tests kind of three things at once. It tests our ability to translate a stream into the archive storage infrastructure, to store it in that realm, and then to export it back out as a stream. That's the round trip where we are taking the debug source, schlonking it into storage, and then pulling that out as an output stream and putting it into a debug sync. Okay. Cool. It is a little more intuitive now that I have debug sync producing and managing the string that it builds, rather than having a reference to it and kind of like injecting from the outside. Now it owns it and it produces it at the end. Sources dutifully bubble up the finalization value, the receipt value of whatever sync they're sticking stuff into. So that's why that comes out being the string. And likewise, this is why this comes out being a string. We're taking this thing that we got out of the archive model, and we're putting it into a debug sync. And the debug sync again produces text. And the reason why this test is failing, on the left-hand side we have empty string. And that's because these are all not to-do macros, but kind of do nothing successfully and pretend we did something. Alright? This is the guy at work who never does anything, but does just enough to look like he's participating enough to have a paycheck. This is the bluff employee. It's not actually storing anything yet. Yeah. It's a bunch of no-ops. It's a bunch of nops. And so naturally, we're storing nothing. This also, on this side, pulls nothing out. So, this is very noppy itself. The reason why I'm getting all these unused variable warnings is because we're not using the storage, and we're not using the little piece of reference of like where to look in the storage to get our archive stuff out, we're only looking at the sync. We are doing nothing with it and immediately finalizing it. The compiler is right. These warnings, as distracting as they might be, are completely correct. It has correctly indicted me. I should be using these variables, and I'm not. And the correct version of these functions will use these variables. And as this stuff gets implemented, all of these yellow warning things are going to slowly evaporate away. Okay. So, archive, source. We're going to need to pull out according to the triad. Okay. What's the storage interface again? Jeez. Okay. So it's gonna be something in the cast. It's read by digest. Okay. And it's gonna get a result of an option of reader. It's a little nesting, but what it means is like this will only fail if there's like actually an IO error. This inner option is whether we found something. I know that IO errors and therefore IO results can represent not found. Alright? We're actually like unpacking from that. It's definitely represented by IO results. However, on consumer code, this is always like a meaningful failure, like, oh shit. Something failed that I probably don't want to have some sort of custom handling for. This just means that wasn't in the store. So because of how calling code is going to use this, I've broken that out into 2 layers of enumeration. Yeah, it's completely fine not to find the file. That is a valid thing. In fact, so this is a trait, and there is a not efficient but pre-provided let's see, storage, traits, CAS. So there's a provided method. Oh no, never mind. It's not currently in here. I had it on an older version of this code. Never mind. My brain glitched and I thought I still had it. But once upon a time, and eventually again, there was a provided method for checking whether something exists. And most content address store implementations will care about overriding that with something efficient. But there is a default implementation to get you by, which attempts to do read, but doesn't actually use the reader. It's really just checking. I'll do that so you can see the documentation. So there was like an exists provided method, and it would attempt to do the read, treat result failures as like bubble them up. It provided a result bool as a return type. All right, it was possible for IO errors to happen, and they were treated like errors. But like after that, it's just like the option dot is sum is the bool. So that's like the naive and completely generic definition of exists. Is you try to read, at least at this level, you don't actually use this part, but you do pay attention to the is sum of the option. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm probably going to run out of time here because my normal end of stream time is 15 minutes from now. I've had an interesting stream. I haven't gotten as much done as usual, but I've had an enjoyable stream. Like, you missed the numerology guy. that was interesting. I have thoughts about him. Interesting character, kind of a jerk. As soon as I wasn't willing to buy into what he was selling. But very interesting, and I learned a lot about Pythagorean numerology. And it's been wonderful to have someone who's, got their brain in this kind of stuff to actually, have a deeper conversation with. Oh, yeah. I'm probably gonna, make a highlight out of it on Twitch or something. So it's, a relevant subset of the overall VOD. I might export it to my YouTube as well. I'm not going to try to caption it. For shorts, I manually caption, and it's very editing intensive. I once did a 40-minute video like that, and it nearly broke my spirit. I mean, it kind of did a little bit. So I'm not going to do that again. I'll do it for shorts. I will not do it for extended pieces. For those, yeah. You're at the mercy for captions, for just whatever the state of the art for YouTube captions is. It's not great. Hopefully it's good enough. That's my attitude for preserved extended stuff. Okay, so I somehow need to make this work. Okay. Alright. So store.cas.read. And I need to make that an exposed thing. So I'm immediately going to have issues with that. Impl, triad. I could do .2, but yeesh. Okay. I'm just gonna wrap that here. Aww. You've helped keep me on track in certain ways. Most times that someone comes on here and I get off track, I'm doing something wildly unrelated, like the Pythagorean numerology stuff I was talking about earlier, where I was kind of reverse engineering what this guy was talking about and turning it into Python functions so I could figure out what the hell he was on about. There was one time that I spent an hour with a bunch of laundry under my shirt pretending to be pregnant because a viewer had a bet with her boyfriend where she thought that she could get a streamer to do that and her boyfriend thought not, and I was like, hell, I'll do it, why not, I'm fun loving. And so I had the pregnancy stream. And I did eventually get a bunch of stuff done, but I had about an hour about an hour of just dicking around, laughing and making jokes. Oh, oh yeah, and part of it was like, I would pretend to have a contraction every time someone subscribed. I had like one subscribe equals one contraction on screen, and every time someone subscribed, I would do my best. Like, oh, my water just broke. So usually when someone in chat has me off track, it's really off track. But this has been topical. You are remarkable. Bless you. Genuinely. It's been wonderful to talk to someone and actually have it be on topic. For real. Yeah. This has been nice. I've still got 9 minutes. Who knows what I can pull off? I could go either way. Honestly, part of it is like, I'm gonna try it out. There's definitely a benefit to the conciseness directly instantiating without the : new. I don't know that I'm going to keep the tuple form, but it was a little refreshing after a prior implementation where it was just like very painfully redundant to be like, because like 2 out of 3 things here are enums. So it's like lowercase format, : capital format, : JSON, comma, lowercase compression, : uppercase compression, : plain. Just for everything. So these can be very concise in certain ways, but I don't know that this is necessarily like the final form. I'm trying this out and seeing if I like it. Seriously. Yes, this is like, it's very clever. I see what you did there. I mean, like, that's just kind of my life as a woman with IBS. No, I'm laughing. This is fun. It's much better to joke about it. All right. Oh, I see what's going on here. It's kind of dumb, but easily fixed. Traits. Oh, I need to have that up here, actually. Maybe here. Who knows? Something that looks good and gets the job done. Okay, no compile errors. Wonderful. So that is a result. Unwrap actual I/O errors. Now it's an option. Okay. Opt reader. It gives me like little hint about what's going on here. We've unwrapped meaningful errors that we just don't want to handle. How do we want to handle the not found case? Like, that is actually a worthwhile question. If we can't it needs to be some sort of failure in an I/O error kind of way. Alright. I'm gonna full screen this for a little bit. New. Use the from conversion for error kind. That's gonna get me. Yeah. These results are stdios. The error fusion story on Rust is a fucking misery. I complain about this on a regular basis. Like, so you're gonna hear the rant now, but I'll keep it brief this time. I'm learning to polish it to a type 5. So one of the things that people usually praise Rust for is how it handles errors. And all of the good things that they say about it are true. I want to start off with that. The fact that you have these types where you can't accidentally use something without in some way handling potential errors, even if it's an unwrap, but you have to acknowledge that something is fallible and make some sort of authorial decision about how to address that fallibility. Conceptually, both results and options are wonderful for representing failures or lack of data as data that is returned and making the happy path inaccessible except through acknowledging potential failure. That part, Rust is great. Rust is doing better than Go. Rust is doing better than a lot of languages. And then it falls apart. Because every result has an error type. Of course. It's the second half of the generic parameters. But there's a lot of misery in what happens when you... Yeah, error handling in Go is horrible. I mean, it's not the worst language for it. At least you're pulling it out, and it's like you kind of feel like a dirtbag if you're not doing something about the, if you're not doing that. If error not equals no. Like, it's verbose and annoying, but your, like, pattern recognition brain is going to pick up on that kind of thing, and you can tell that it's wrong if you use it wrong. Alright? Yeah, the lack of syntactic sugar sucks. that would probably be my main problem with Go's error syntax. And also, like, I have two problems. One is the lack of syntax sugar, and the other is the lack of, like, wrapping it in a single object where the success thing can only be accessed by some sort of intentional unpacking of the object. Like, being able to return multiple values, fantastic in any language. Like, I love that feature. I hate when languages don't have that feature. Single return values can kiss my ass. But if one of the things that you're returning, is usually a success case, but sometimes it's not valid data, that's a bit of a foot gun. And that's the thing about Go's implementation of error handling, is it's foot guns that are easy to not shoot yourself with, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like, you can choose to ignore errors in Rust, but you're doing that in sort of a conscious way where you feel the caution of it. Like, I'm unwrapping, and it gives me a little rumbly tummy. You know? Like, I really gotta be sure of my invariance here, because I know I'm taking a risk. And that risk assessment in your brain is nice. You know? There's an honesty there. So that's stuff that Rust does better than Go. But a lot of code that you do in Rust, you are going to have, like, because you're kind of encouraged to, and because it's a good idea in a lot of senses, you're going to have a bunch of different types of errors. And you're going to be, when you're doing high-level code that's interacting with, I'm doing this MySQL stuff, and I'm doing this, like, file system manipulation stuff, and I'm doing this internet stuff. Yeah, it's not ignoring the error. It's blowing the fuck up if there's an error, and it won't continue with undefined behavior. 100%. You know? Like, it can be abused to ignore an error, but you are citing your name to be the one who's in trouble if there is an error. You know? Like, you're taking responsibility for the fact that it might blow up. So I like unwrap in that kind of way, you know? So the problem I want to talk about with Rust is that when you're doing high-level code that's interacting with a bunch of other things that have their own error types that are often, like, domain-specific enums. Like, I have a label type that has some validation when you create one, because it needs to start with an @ symbol and then have lowercase alphanumeric after that. I might relax those requirements a little bit, but, like, there's a custom enum for the types of errors that might happen on label validation. So you're going to have a whole bunch of different error types. So let's say you have a function where the different things that you do in that function can fail in different ways, therefore with different error types. What is the return type of your glue function that has all that stuff inside it? One of the best approaches that most people have available to them is the anyhow crate. And there's pros and cons to the anyhow crate. It's a clever crate, but the implementation apparently required, like, a lot of scary magic. Yeah, it's exactly. ideally would be like a lot more unification in returnable errors. And I'm not saying that I have like some perfectly workshopped, pristine alternative in my head where I'm like, I wish it was this thing that is super great, and the Rust developers are just stupid that they didn't think of this perfect implementation. Like, maybe I'll workshop that someday, but like the design of the language and the way that results work and everything and errors work kind of leads to this situation. Hi, Swam. I'm doing good. I'm literally at the end of my day here. Yeah. Oh, GoLinters do whine about doing that and want you to create specific types. I bet they do. I haven't been in the Go scene for a little while now, but that sounds very plausible from my limited experience with GoLinters. So anyway, Swam, I'm winding down for the day, but I'm giving my rant about Rust's error handling, if you want to hear it. I'm gonna say it anyways, because I was partway through. So much of the time, yeah. I'll recap real quick, but I'll be a lot more brief than I was before. Because the first time I was kind of like being a bit interactive with chat. So, speedrun. There's a lot that Rust gets right about errors. Having it be an object that you have to say how to handle errors in order to get the data. You can't just like pretend that things were okay. You need to say like how to handle failure, even if it's just panic and crash the program which is .unwrap. All right, but you have to make some sort of authorial decision rather than just shrugging. All right, so that's good. Having a difference between options and results is good. And having a flexibility of error types is good. Because having specific error types that are often domain-specific enumerations is wonderful. Here's where the problem lies. As soon as you get to a certain level of high-level code, you're not just doing file system stuff, or network stuff, or talking to a database which has its own specific errors, or doing some local data validation. You've got a function that either directly or indirectly could have a failure of any of those kinds. Now, yeah, sure, your function should return a result because it can fail, and you know what the success type is. What should the error type be when it could be any one of like 4 different things? And there's not really very good sugar and syntax for being able to handle that situation. For being able to be like, I don't know, it might fail in any one of these ways. Here's the ways it can fail. There's dyn error, which is supposed to kind of have that flexibility and benefit, but it's really awkward to use in practice. And that's part of the failure, is that that's awkward to use in practice. Usually no. Usually the high-level code that is doing this doesn't care what the failure is, and it's just trying to bubble it up to an even higher color. Like almost always, you don't care at that function. Maybe the caller cares what type. Usually what the caller cares about is not so much the type, but the ability to print it. So having like a generic dynamic error type, that technically exists, but it's so cumbersome that no one wants to use it. And it's not used by default in any of the standard library, because by default they want to use specific error types rather than generic error types, which is understandable. So it means the generic flexifying rests on your shoulders, and you might need to rely on the anyhow crate, which is based on arcane magic. And when you look at it as a whole, when you look at the whole situation, you get this gnawing feeling in your stomach. Like, you know what this looks like? In every possible way, you know what my pattern recognizing brain is recognizing. There's like a missing language feature. There's something that needs to be handled by the compiler or the prelude or something that is available language-wide, maintained by the language and its developers, and universally available. Because otherwise you end up having to deal with multiple different code bases solving this problem in different ways incompatible with each other. And then you have like the XKCD standards comic, basically, which, if you've never seen that, misspelled it because I was in a rush. Yeah. How standards proliferate. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14? Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah. Soon, situation, there are 15 competing standards. It's a classic. It's evergreen in its relevance, unfortunately. It's a perennial issue anywhere that standards of any kind exist. There's a reason that this comic is so generic and yet so incisive. Hover text on this one. Fortunately, the charging one has been solved now that we've all standard on mini USB. Or is it micro USB? Shit. That's aged like wine, because now we use USB-C. That text got funnier over time. I did not expect that. That's amazing. It's so much better than I could have predicted. I forgot that that was the hover text. Classic, classic, classic. So, yeah. Aerodynamism is kind of like the name I would give to the missing feature here. And it's not that you can't do it. It's that there is like a cumbersome and inadequate approach to it in the standard library. There are non-interoperable solutions in third-party libraries, and what it clearly needs is one actually usable, blessed and built-in solution into the language itself. Will we get that in my lifetime? I don't know. Who can say? I'm not on that team, and I don't follow it super closely. But I can tell you that, like, yeah, I wouldn't bet on it. And it's a point of constant frustration and suffering for me, practically. And I don't want to use anyhow in library code, because then it forces the specific use of anyhow on people who use my code as a library rather than a command line program. Like, if I was just using it for a command line program, which is usually the high level GUID stuff, admittedly, who cares? All right? I won't have any consumers who get indigestion from me using the anyhow crate. But as soon as you're making a library, you have to solve the solution in potentially a novel way to try to like make something that all your callers can live with. Yeah, like anyhow is actually pretty nice from an external perspective. Like in terms of the interface, I kind of like anyhow. The implementation is the kind of scary that really hints that it belongs in the compiler. Like, the reason why you get scary code like that is because this is something that the compiler is supposed to do, and if you don't have first party support, and you have to make it work in third party land, you have to do some arcane, potentially fragile stuff. And it's a popular enough crate that, like, maybe I'm being a little unreasonable about complaining about the arcanity, because at least it's well maintained. Yeah, it's workarounds all the way down. So, like, at least there is community incentive for it to be well maintained, but that inner nightmare is a symptom that this should be implemented in the compiler. And the popularity is another indication that this needs to be present, built in the language. So that there is one standard you can rely on, and not just rely on, that you don't have to feel bad about bubbling it up to callers if you're writing library code. You know? Like, I never have to worry about returning a result, for example. Alright? That's built into the language. Everyone uses results all the time. If I don't ever have to feel guilty about expecting my callers to support results. Ever. Like, that's just the right way to do it. It's built in. You can live with this. But when there's that lack of built-in language support and a proliferation of different third-party attempts to fill the gap, picking a winner and forcing your callers to use it sucks, because maybe they also need to use another library that picked a different third-party aerodynamism approach. And now they have to fuse between anyhow and some other shit. Yeah. Thankfully, I have not had to do too much of that personally. And it's nice that I have, like, I'm pretty sure they have duration built in and stuff like that. It's not completely lacking, but yeah, it's not as good as a lot of languages. And for a lot of use cases, yeah, you have to use some sort of crate. 20 other crates recursively brought into your cargo belt lock because you want to display date time in your local time zone. For real. You know? And if I wanted to live like that, I'd just write JavaScript with, like, NPM and node modules, you know? Like, that's my go-to negative stereotype for an impoverished standard library leading to a hellish interoperability and competitiveness nightmare in the ecosystem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of overlap between the standard library issues of Rust and the ones of JavaScript. And it's like, and Rust is a bit better, in my opinion, than JavaScript on this specific topic. But, like, god damn, I don't want to be downloading 2 or 3 gigabytes of dependencies to do any kind of like basic modern development. And Rust is not that bad, but has some of the same issues that make JavaScript absolutely that bad. Rust is a bit better, but not as better as it should be. Like, everyone should be a lot better than JavaScript on this topic. I like JavaScript as a language, but not as a standard library. Like, I know people think it's masochistic to like raw vanilla JavaScript. I like it. I just don't necessarily like the APIs all the time. It's, it's something where there should be a better standard library for JavaScript. And it's gotten better than it used to be. But there's a reason why, like, it used to be impractical to make a interactive website without something like Lodash or jQuery or, all these things. Like, it was so lacking in the basics that you had to use something third party just to make it, like, something you could cope with. JavaScript is pretty alright. One of my first programming languages, maybe I'm demented for liking it. I can't rule that out. I'm demented in plenty of other ways. I don't know. So who can say I shouldn't be the one making the judgment call because I am biased on the topic. Conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the other thing too of the same time period is the browser war. So not only were you lacking in basic functionality, but like the ways to get there, if they were even possible, were contradictory. So a lot of what those libraries that did exist in the ecosystem, a lot of what they actually did was like polyfilling and normalization to make all the browsers act the same. And like, hey, if you were there, 80% of that work. Right? Okay, so depending on the exact era, because this was, you're making me realize, a bit of a longer time period than I was originally conceptualizing, and it's totally true. But like, the main offender in my mind is always Internet Explorer. Like, most of my early professional career was dealing with the fact that Internet Explorer was missing features entirely or had their own dumbass way of implementing them. They required completely different code. Like dealing with XHR/Ajax. So every step of the way, we were having to polyfill for the fact that IE was just not a good browser. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Especially if you had to support IE6. Internet Explorer 6 was so popular for so long, and it was just so inadequate for most of its popular lifetime. Steaming pile of shit is completely accurate for Internet Explorer. One of the most deserved negative reputations in its realm of all time. Right? Like, if Netscape Navigator had stuck around that long, it probably would have had that same, like, super public consciousness negative reputation. Oh god, yeah, the lack of even transparent PNGs. Embarrassing. So people didn't hate on, like, Navigator and, like, the early Mozilla browser before it was even called Firefox. People didn't hate on those things too much because they had their brief lifetime, and then they were successfully succeeded by better iterations in the same series. Right? They didn't stick around a decade after the expiration date on the can. An Internet Explorer did. There is an argument that if it had been short-lived, IE6, it wouldn't have been a good browser, but it wouldn't have a terrible reputation. No one would care. No one would be bothered by IE6. But it lived like fucking Methuselah. Like 900 years of Internet Explorer 6 being popular enough that it made sense to support professionally. I would not want to go back to those days. We're very distracted now, very off topic, and I gotta get off stream. But that was fun. And it's nice to commiserate with someone who was in the trenches too. Oy vey. And because it didn't involve you, it makes it... Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, like, 7, 8, 9, even 10, because they had a lot of the same, like, special case behavior, they got better over time, but they weren't really good. They just got less bad, if that makes sense. Yeah, veteran soldiers. Yeah. This stream has felt like hanging out at the VA, I assume. Maybe I'll have to ask my partner, because she was in the military. So she actually knows a thing or two about that. But it definitely feels like I should have a beer cracked open here. Just it's a wonder we got out alive. I remember what General Balmer put us through. I think it was Steve Ballmer at the time. Developers. Meme-worthy. I'm convinced that man was like 30% cocaine at any given moment. Just the Rob Ford of corporate software. But I guess, that's one of the privileges of, right? And with all the sweating and everything. Like, it's one of the best explanations I've ever been able to come up with. Yeah, that's just because my computer fell asleep. Because I have a separate computer for developing, and streaming, which helps, yeah. It helps prevent, like, personal search terms from showing up in my Omnibox and stuff when I'm using the browser. This is a very pristine, very clean, development-only machine. But that does mean that I can fall asleep if I'm not keeping it awake. And it's connected via HDMI. So. Oh, okay. There we go. But yeah, I do think that having a severe cocaine habit and keeping your job and being able to afford the cocaine habit is one of the quintessential privileges of C-level corporate pay. Not everyone takes advantage of it, necessarily. Not everyone should. But there's a reason that, like, movie studios in the 80s were putting shit out like Gremlins 2. and like, is it Weird Science where they mess with the computer and it generates a woman? There's so much bonkers stuff that came out on TV too. And it's just because, like, everyone above a certain pay grade was like, I can afford cocaine. And I'm going to do something about that. And I think it's, it's less common now. People have moved on to other stuff, but it was like, you couldn't practically be a business executive and sober. Yeah, it was so much of an era thing in basically all of the Western world. Just funny like that. I have to wonder, like, how much of that had to do with the CIA. Was it the CIA? I think it was the CIA that was, like, making the drug crisis so much worse by bringing a bunch of cheap cocaine into the country to fund the other stuff that they were doing. Which is, like, the most wild, bonkers thing. And it's confirmed, and there's, like, a bunch of documentation about it. They got caught doing it. It was a big public scandal. I think I'm the wrong person to ask about this because I'm quarter remembering every single aspect of it. Because it was way before my time. I'm a 90s kid. So, before my time. Yeah. 80s, horrible haircuts, hair metal, and executives with 50% of them being coke. Yes, absolutely. Because they had a lot of money, and coke was probably, at the time, like, at an all-time affordability. These days... muscle guys. Sorry. Okay, I don't know. Like, once it gets past a certain point, not my type. But up to a certain point, like, guys who are a bit fit can get it. If that makes me basic, I don't care. Like, although, if we're on that topic, and then I really do have to get off the stream, because it's starting to be the time of day where I cook in here, and it gets, like, really hot in my room. Yeah. I have a very wide diversity of types. Like, the starting point of that is that I'm pansexual, and I usually I usually prefer women in like a general average sense. But there's some hot guys. I've got like a long distance boyfriend in California that comes up every once in a while. And it's wonderful when he does. Love that guy. You know, but for me, what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a guy. Well, honestly, from anyone. Now that I think about it, I can make this super general. Good hygiene. Nice person. I don't date nasty people. I'm just not gonna waste my time on that. I'm not gonna reward that kind of behavior. And ideally not an excessive amount of hair. Alright? Like, I'm willing to flex on that a little bit for someone who's very nice and takes care of themselves. You know. But those are my things I'm looking for. Oh no! Oh no! Well, at least you're nice. I don't know anything else about you, but you're nice. The hair thing is the most negotiable for me, though. Like, if that's the thing, that's the most negotiable, for what it's worth. The guy that I mentioned who lives in California, he's a bit hairy, and I love him enough that I put up with it. But there are times where I'm just like, you know, like, just, for example, trying to kiss his chest, I'm just like, oh, that got in my throat. Buddy boy. I don't want to be rude about it. He's got his aesthetic. And I have a lot of reasons that I love him. But goddamn. It's not even like a visuals thing. It's a sensory thing. You know? There's a reason I had like a big phase of being like thinking that my taste in men was twinks exclusively. I've come to realize that's not actually true. But there's a reason I thought it was true for a while. So anyways, that's too much information about my preferences in that domain. Yeah, exactly. It took me a while to come to that conclusion. But, you know, like, I do really enjoy femininity and softness, and, like, guys who are more on the feminine side of the spectrum were a bit kind of like my gateway to being into guys. And then, like, my taste expanded when I got there. It's very much like when you first start drinking alcohol, you might go for, like, 7 and 7 or a Jack and Coke or something that's, you know, much more approachable. But then once you get into it, then you have a more balanced field of taste, potentially. That's what happened for me, but with attraction to men. Yeah. Okay, well, you're right that it's TMI. I will shut up, and I will end my stream. My judgment is being cooked away as we speak, and I'm getting visibly sweaty, I'm sure. Like, so I better hit stop before I say other unhinged things. Alright, thank you for being on the stream, both of you. It's been very nice, and I will be back on 10 a.m. PST on Friday.